Good afternoon, and welcome to the second event of our Youth Voice and Power Summit. Last month, the Annie E. Casey Foundation announced Thrive by 25, our plan to devote at least half of our investments over the next decade to help improve the well-being and success of youth and young adults ages 14 to 24. As a part of that announcement, we kicked off a series of events designed to bring young people's voices, experiences, and insights front and center. Our first event featured a panel of young leaders and lieutenant governors. They discussed how policymakers can act on young people's ideas about what youth and young adults need to realize their full potential. I encourage you to check out the full recording of the event on our website. One takeaway from that conversation and from our experience at the Casey Foundation is that we can't just advocate on behalf of young people. They must be part of developing solutions to the challenges they face. And we've seen the ways that they can improve and advance our work. Bringing them to the table as genuine partners has given us greater insight into their needs and surfaced fresh ideas. It's also given them important opportunities to lead and grow. I am constantly impressed by their sense of compassion, their ambitions, and the thoughtfulness of their solutions to the problems that they've faced. But you don't have to just take my word for it. Our first panel today will feature young people that we've directly engaged in the Foundation's work. We're also excited to have a panel of mayors join this conversation and look forward to hearing their thoughts on collaborating with young people to improve the way cities support young people's well-being and enable them to succeed. I'm sure it's going to be a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Spencer. I'm an associate director here at the Annie Casey Foundation. And along with Lisa, I'd like to welcome you to the Youth Voice and Power Summit 2. Just a thing before we get started, there's one housekeeping item I'd like to let you be aware of. As you can see, we have closed captioning for this virtual event to improve accessibility to all. You have the option, though, to leave it alone and allow the captioning to continue, or you can turn off the captioning by clicking the letter CC in the lower right corner of your screen. That being said, last month, we had two phenomenal conversations as the foundation rolled out Thrive by 25, which puts an increased focus on older youth and young adults. It was fascinating to hear young people share their perspectives around leadership, organizing, and engagement. We're pleased today to follow up that session by going deeper into a discussion on youth leaderships, youth partnerships, and talk about how foundations, nonprofits, government, and business can work more effectively with young people and view them as true partners in those endeavors. We think it is fair to show the foundation's work with young people, giving you candid insight into our experiences. To do that, we brought together a panel of young people and Casey staff involved in two program areas, the Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative and the Baltimore Civic Site. To guide today's discussion, I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Burgundy Allison, a program associate on the Baltimore Civic Site team. Burgundy?
Thank you, Scott. Today, we will be hearing from two Casey staff members and two of the young people they've partnered with. First up is Leslie Gross, who directs the Casey Foundation's Family Wellbeing Strategy Group, inclusive of the Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative. She is joined by Sonia Emerson, who has served as a fellow for the Foundation's Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative since 2017. We will also hear from Sarah Mumford, Senior Associate who oversees economic opportunity strategies for the Casey Foundation's Baltimore Civic Site. She's joined by Kirsten Allen, a business and strategy consultant who has partnered with the Foundation on several efforts, including a participatory research project to assess Baltimore's workforce landscape. Thank you for joining us, ladies. We're going to get started. The first question is for Sarah and Leslie. What about your work necessitates partnership with young people?
Thanks, Burgundy. Am I going to kick us off here?
You are.
Great.
Jump right in.
Awesome. It's great to be here with you all today. So let me start by just giving a little bit of context for our work for those who might not be familiar with the Jim Casey Initiative. The initiative was created about 20 years ago at a time when there was really no focus on older youth in and transitioning from foster care. So the overarching work of the Jim Casey Initiative is about ensuring young people 14 to 26 who've experienced foster care have what they need to thrive. From the beginning, the Jim Casey Initiative was built on the philosophy that in order to create solutions to improve outcomes, the wisdom of young people who have experienced the system was critical. So to make that happen, the initiative engaged young people to develop a model of youth-adult partnership, and that has really continued to evolve over time. I'm sure many of you have heard the mantra, nothing about us without us. That's exactly for us what necessitates partnership in all of our work. That means capacity building, so young people are leading advocacy and shaping policy in their own communities. It also means collaborating with young people on a national level through our direct partnership with young fellows like Sonia, who you're going to hear from in a few minutes here today. These young leaders shape our strategies around things like education success, financial capability, and ensuring permanent connections for young people leaving foster care. Sonia is helping to lead this particular effort where a group of young leaders are really trailblazing to create a new kind of permanency for older youth that could literally change the trajectory for so many who are coming behind them. The bottom line is when we engage directly with people impacted, the possibilities just completely shift. And that's why it's proven critical in our work. Personally, I know that I can't walk in someone else's shoes or live their experience. So to me, ensuring that those with lived experience are sharing their knowledge, helping us interpret the meaning of data that represents them, and contributing their ideas and expertise on effective solutions is the only approach that will ever get us to where what young people actually need in the way that they need it and not what we think they need. So I'll leave it there and turn over to Sarah.
Thanks, Leslie. I'll share a bit of context about some of the work in Baltimore. So I'm responsible for our economic opportunity investments in our hometown of Baltimore. Many of these strategies are focused on youth and young adults. So for our conversation this afternoon, Kirsten and I will be focusing on a body of work that was started over 6 years ago by my predecessor, Danielle Terrain. I'd like to give Danielle a quick shout out and deep gratitude. She's now the director of OSI Baltimore. She, in partnership with community members, developed and implemented the work that we'll discuss today. The work came as a result of the uprising that followed Freddie Gray's death in April of 2015, which we know was a response to the vast disparities families in Baltimore City have faced for decades. It exposed deeply rooted inequities that have left thousands of young people like Freddie disconnected from employment, education, and training opportunities. So as a result, several public and private partners, including the Casey Foundation, wanted to strengthen investments in the city's young people and began focusing more intentionally on young adults who are neither working or in school. One of the larger government-funded initiatives called One Baltimore for Jobs provided young people with the access to occupational skills training and other barrier removal supports. As this program and others like it were implemented, challenges recruiting and retaining young youth began to emerge. So many of the direct service providers sought to gain a better understanding of young people's needs and interests to develop the most effective strategies for reaching them. In order to truly understand the why of these challenges, the Baltimore Civic Site team invested in a participatory research pilot to help program staff, other local partners and funders authentically engage the voices and experiences of young people in Baltimore within the context of workforce development. Quickly, I just wanted to share a few of the core tenets of this project. One was to engage young adult community leaders like Kirsten as equitably paid consultants to plan and implement this work. The 7 consultants were and continue to be all highly respected, deeply committed community leaders of color, mirroring Baltimore's population of a majority Black resident city. The consultants set the scope of the project, designed an engagement process that they felt would genuinely connect with young Baltimoreans. Second was spurring the development of more effective workforce interventions by enabling youth and young adults to respond openly and express their concerns, their dreams, their aspirations, their hopes. We cannot create opportunities for young people without their voice. And third, demonstrate the feasibility of bringing young adults and other community voices into the institutional decision-making process, not just for this project, but really as a standard practice for Casey and other peers in the field.
Thank you, Sarah and Leslie. So now we have context for why it is that Casey finds it necessary to partner with young people. Now we want to hear from Sonia and Kirsten. How do you define youth-adult partnership?
Absolutely. Kirsten, is it okay if I go or you want to go?
Absolutely. Take it away.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, first of all, I know there's young people attending and listening in, so I just want to say thank you. You inspire us every day to keep our work going, and it is very crucial, to Sarah and Leslie's point, that our voices are a part of the conversation and a part of the infrastructure of the work that we do constantly every day. So you're super, super needed. And I just wanted to say I see you. And yeah, let me talk about a little bit the important components of youth leadership. So I know things sound so scripted right now. So sometimes I might just kind of go on my own little tangent. So I'm going to try to stay on track. But one of the most important components to me when we talk about youth adult, like authentic partnership, is being intentional about how we engage with young people in conversation. It's about creating a culture where we feel safe and where things aren't just being rubber stamped, right? Or check boxes. As we know, in a lot of spaces, that could be the case. But really finding ways to integrate us as young people into, the daily work of the adults and the leaders. And I know actually many of you are young adults as well. So just acknowledging there's a certain power in that as well. That's really necessary. Another way I like to define it is being in conscious relationship, right? Being in conscious relationship with us as young people. What does that look like? I think that's making sure that we're a part of the conversation from the very, very beginning, defining clear roles for us and responsibilities in the partnership, placing us in key leadership positions where we can really thrive on existing committees or boards, being a part of meetings, leading, co-designing, co-leading, and co-collaborating in those meetings. Asking us as young people effective questions like, what do you think is missing? Or, from your experience, how could we make this work better for us? And making sure that we're included in the day-to-day, but also the bylaws and the mission, that we're part of designing what that looks like for organizations and foundations. And then lastly, I think allowing us to really contribute to organizational changes, right? Like foundational changes. When there's shifts in the culture of a foundation, we need to be a part of those conversations. It's so necessary. And I think lastly, just considering how do we support and prepare young people to be a part of those conversations. But more so, what I feel like we forget a lot of the times is that adults also need that preparation, right? And sometimes adults also show up, not meaning to, with good intention, but sometimes ill-equipped. And so having them have coaching and technical assistance and ongoing training on how they can do that work, to make it effective and successful for us as young people is also very, very needed. So that's really all I have to give to kick us off. But Kirsten, what about you?
You said all you have to give?
That's all I have to. Well, I have a lot more to give. There's
you
so
gave
much.
a lot.
But little time.
You gave us a lot. And this conversation is definitely going to be difficult just because of the time restraints. But I have to share the same sentiments of my peer, is just youth voice in the equation is just so utterly important. And not just youth voice, but just being active and having that engagement. So all the notes that she listed off were definitely imperative to the process. I myself, I'm not a great definition setter. So when I was thinking about this question and my response, I'm like, I actually don't have a real definition for it because I think it can be executed in so many ways. But when I think about a process or how things operate, I like to think outside and in, like what is the inner that needs to be there so you can really build out from there. And when you think about the core values of what's needed, you need respect. There needs to be power sharing, transparency, reciprocal learning, understanding. So when I think about like youth engagement and partnership, those are some of the core elements that I feel like are fundamentally that need to be there.
Thank you both. So to your point, Kirsten, about not being a person who can offer up a definition, the next question is really about identifying two hallmarks of authentic partnership. So you guys named a lot. If you had two to elevate that our attendees should take away and start to work on maybe as adding to their toolkit as they prepare to enter into authentic partnership, what would those two be?
So there are like core ones that need to be there. Sometimes it depends on the space that you're in or who you're actually interacting with. I think just based on my experience with Annie Casey Foundation, two core hallmarks were equitable compensation and decision-making authority. On all the projects that I've been involved on, especially the participatory one, all youth leaders or young adult leaders had the power to make decisions. Like we created the process and we implemented the process. So if, those are the two hallmarks. If I had to choose, I would lift up.
Yeah,
Sonia?
I definitely would say power sharing is necessary and a lot of times uncomfortable for us as young people as well as adults, I'm sure, in the room too, especially when we're learning to build that dynamic and create a foundation where that's like normal. For me, I think two hallmark moments, or what I would just say, are really the defining moments for me with the foundation that really set the tone of like what effective youth adult partnership looks like. Is I remember, I'm a storyteller, so bear with me. I remember a moment, my first time being accepted to our National Youth Leadership Institute in Baltimore. And that's really where it's comprised of about 17 states of young people, young national leaders that come together for a week's worth of work around youth leadership development as well as policy advocacy work. And I remember from the moment that I was engaged, which was months prior to actually physically being in that space in Baltimore, till the very day that we were actually engaged in the work, that they made sure that there was, their youth engagement members reaching out to us, scheduling video calls, phone calls, asking how can they best support us in our travel. It was my first time ever traveling out of Cleveland, Ohio. And so I was terrified and I was just like, I don't know, but they helped me navigate and they did it so early on. And so when I talk about the importance of really engaging young people early on, it's about that preparation. It's about that support. It's about that opportunity, which actually is a Jim Casey's framework that they really, really build on with young people. And so that was kind of like a defining or a hallmark moment for me, because I remember actually physically arriving there to the hotel. And the compensation that Kirsten mentioned earlier, super important. When we showed up, they were standing there ready to greet us with W-2s, which was like mind-blowing to me, because it sent a message that like you're a professional in this work, you're an expert in this work, and you're a colleague in this work. And so that was like a super hallmark moment. I could go on and on about hallmark moments, but I will say my second one is learning to analyze data. So while throughout our week together, we were told that we were going to have some data, which was sent out to us 2 months prior. And I did not look at it, I would be honest with you. I was so intimidated by it. But I remember thinking to myself as a young leader, I'm not smart enough, to analyze this data. And they were asking us to tell a story and how it was relatable to us. And I remember thinking to myself, being in different settings with other organizations that prided themselves on being youth focused, that a lot of times they were just asking for a head nod from me. And again, that rubber stamping. And it wasn't really true engagement. There was no context setting. There was no deeper preparation. And so one of the things that the foundation did for me to help me really prepare, that I define as a hallmark moment, is we did what we call a data walk. We walked around the room and we really looked at data specific to our states, which really felt like I could connect to this experience. And they allowed us to each have something to contribute to that conversation. And I remember thinking to myself, this is really crazy that when people actually take the time to be intentional about, breaking us into groups, giving us specific stuff that relates to our experience, how like game changing that was. And at the end of the week, I just kind of want to say this. I was like an expert. If I spoke like the love language of data, I definitely was that, right? Like that was my love language at the end of this week. So much that we got to go to Capitol Hill and speak to legislators to actually, tell them the story that the data was showing, to advocate for, financial capability or different things for our local state and bring it back home. And so those are two hallmark moments for me as a foundation of like, that's what it looks like when we're really engaging young people authentically. So.
Thank you. My next question for Sarah and Leslie. Sonia actually spoke about this in her answer to my first question. And the question is, how did you prepare to enter into partnership with young people? You as individuals, you as representatives of your unit and the larger foundation, what was that process like?
Yeah, so I'll give a few quick nuggets and then, punt it to you, Leslie. I mentioned earlier in my opening comments, I inherited the participatory research project, and I had a steep learning curve, admittedly. So I think one of the biggest lessons for me is to listen, and keep listening. I knew what I didn't know, and so it was really important for me to just listen and learn. And I think that's a critical piece of partnership. I think the second is just acknowledgement that young people know what they need and thus must be a significant and equitable, inclusive partner when making decisions. So just that was grounding for the work and a bedrock of the work. And then also, I think the ability to communicate the importance of the inclusion of youth voice in decision making and in project work within your own organization. And again, I'll thank my predecessor for really paving the way within the foundation of why this is important, and frankly, how this project has really helped inform me in all of my investments. I really consider those recommendations that came from that work as my roadmap for investments, knowing that youth voice was actively part of the process. So just wanted to share those quick few lessons.
Yeah, I really appreciate what Sonia and I think Kirsten lifted up as well, but how partnership really hinges on this idea of preparation on both sides. So for adults and folks in positions of power, I feel like preparing really means a willingness to step back and to actively listen, which I think everyone has mentioned the importance of listening, and to be real about implementing solutions put forth by young people. On the other side, it really means ensuring opportunities for young leaders are meaningful to them, not a rubber stamp like you heard Sonia refer to. And that requires preparation to allow young people to feel comfortable and to feel confident, and then to ensure those supports are in place, like fair compensation. So I have to say that before coming to the foundation and doing this particular work, I really don't think I knew what authentic partnership meant. Having come from a background as a lawyer working in child welfare, I worked with young people, but not as collaborative partners. So I really had to dig into some of my own mental models that I held around young people and be in a space of learning. Some of the key things that I think I've learned that I really believe were critical for me and I hope might be helpful to others are things like assessing readiness to authentically partner and being real about what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. Also, holding ourselves to the same standards of respect with young people like colleagues. We also have to understand that sometimes the work can get really personal and can make folks feel vulnerable, particularly in the space of child welfare. And this sometimes requires slowing down, taking time to listen and to process. It's also critical for us to be transparent about things like how the decision making will happen. And another big one for me is around recognizing that authentic partnership really only moves at the speed of trust. Building trusting relationships, this means things aren't always going to go at the pace that we're used to or that the dominant white supremacy culture demands and has really normalized. And I say white supremacy culture because, like everything else, we really have to realize the intersections of race, ethnicity, age, and even position when we're preparing and working with young people, and have to be really open to the idea that something you might strongly believe could be wrong. So I would say that overall, partnership really requires us to do some unlearning of some things. It requires us to be willing to learn new things and also just being okay with leaning into that discomfort. It's, also requires some patience and understanding that things aren't always going to go perfectly. And that's okay, because I feel like we always end up learning so much along the way.
Thank you. That was powerful, and I think it was indicative of the level of intentionality around entering into these partnerships. But as in any situation, you can prepare as much as you do, and there can still be some things that get missed. And so, from Sonia and Kirsten's perspective, in your work with the foundation, can you recall any blind spots, or can you elevate any key learnings that you want to offer to the foundation that could strengthen the partnerships that we entered into with young people?
Absolutely. I definitely, to Leslie's point, having a level of vulnerability, I think that's paired with being adaptable, right? And being a little flexible. Understanding that as young people, we have our own thoughts, our recommendations, our feelings about things, and we come in the door ready, right? Like we come in the door, we know what we want. We're going to shake up the infrastructure of whatever you thought was set, the ground was set, and we're going to break that ground apart, and we're going to say, we need to do a reset. We need to do it together. And I think, to Leslie's point, it's going to be uncomfortable sometimes, right? And so for me, one of the key learnings is that, like, the work demands, in order for us to move the work forward, it demands that we have listening ears, which Sarah was kind of mentioning, like listening. And it really demands a level of transparency. Me and Leslie shared a moment on our prep call yesterday together. I was just saying, thank you so much for always making time, to give me as many prep calls as I need, because I get really anxious before these things. And she stopped and said, Sonia, I don't know if you realize how much more I may needed this than you, and how supported I feel like when you're in the room. And so for someone who is my director and at the caliber level that Leslie is, for her to have that level of like transparency and say, like, look, I don't have it all figured out, is where we start. So that's kind of like the key learning for me. And I think the last one would be creating a safe space for young people to thrive and take risks. One of the things that Jim Casey Youth Initiative really values is the adolescent brain. And what we know about that is that we're constantly, even in our like mid to late 20s, we're still rewiring our brains to figure things out. And so having adults in the room that really understand what that means and what that looks like, and being able to say, you know what, like, I can still hold the space of where I respect you as a colleague, but I also know that you have some learning, you have some learning to do, and we have learning to do together, is super necessary in developing and like growing and stretching into, Leslie, the way you say it, leaning in a little bit, which is uncomfortable. So those were my key learnings for sure.
Yeah, so I think from my experience with the foundation specifically, well, Annie Casey Foundation, but it was, so I consider myself like an on the ground person, like someone who works like directly with community. It's one thing to impact community, it's another thing to like walk with community. I don't even consider community like I am community. So when I reference it, like I'm talking about myself. But when I think about like how delicate this process was, just me entering the space of this community development and working with foundations, I didn't have the best, I have to be honest, like I didn't have the best view of Casey Foundation. So I came in with my own bias just based on experiences that I've either experienced or I heard about happening in East Baltimore, which is home to me. So when I came in, it was important for me to be able to separate the people with the foundation. And I think that was something that I continue to carry on throughout my experiences, because I wasn't, when I came in and was working with Danielle and then later working with Sarah, I wasn't looking at them like representatives of a Casey Foundation. Like I connected with Danielle. Like I was able to build a relationship with Sarah. So that contributed to my experience overall. And I think it's just really important to have the right people in place that aren't just representing an organization, but they also remember that they have core personal values that they are showing up to represent when they're working with people.
Thank you. Thank you. So we've got about 3 minutes. Sarah and Leslie, fairly quickly so that Sonia and Kirsten can have the last word. What motivated you to professionalize your relationships and move from authentic partnership to bringing Kirsten on as a consultant, bringing Sonia on as a consultant? What was the motivation for that? And was it a hard sell?
Yeah, I'll be super quick. I think it's really important to underscore that I referenced 7 consultants worked on the participatory research project. They were sharing their experiences and their expertise with many city stakeholders during the time of Freddie Gray's death. A lot of times without compensation or acknowledgement of their intellectual worth. So this project really, I think Kirsten brought it up and Sonia, like compensation, equitable compensation is really, really important, and was also a crucial and critical space for their own personal and professional development. So I share that to kind of tee up that the work was invaluable to me and my portfolio of work. So specific to Kirsten, the value and quality of her work was proven 10 times over. And as I shared, I use the work to this day. That was 6 years ago, but I use it as my roadmap for investments. So when other opportunities arose in my portfolio, it was a no-brainer to onboard Kirsten as a continued trusted consultant in other work. So it was not a hard sell at all, because we had already done and laid the groundwork within the Civic Site and within the foundation. So Leslie?
Yeah, Burgundy, so much to unpack around that question around professionalizing partnership and relationships. A couple quick things that come to mind for me is I think in the child welfare field, there's actually been a lot of momentum around hiring folks with lived experience in a lot of different roles. And so that's kind of a big, exciting thing that is happening out in the world. When I think about our direct partnership, so in the context of the Jim Casey Initiative with Young Fellows, our work has always been intended to be professional in nature. So that looks like things that have been mentioned: compensating fellows at an equitable rate, scheduling meetings that work for them, even when it means evenings and weekends, and integrating some of the professional development and coaching supports, and ultimately just holding each other accountable as colleagues. For our team, the opportunities for more part-time or full-time roles on projects is really driven by what the work demands. So for example, that specific work I mentioned earlier around permanent connections that Sonia's working with us, that really required a part-time consulting arrangement. And so that's what we did. So we really try to just figure it out in that way. And I think there's just always room to grow. And we're fortunate that folks like Sonia and her colleagues, which are many, have really been pushing us to dig deeper on some of these issues and really just kind of continue to be learning in that space. So I'll leave it there so we can have last word from Sonia and Kirsten.
Thank you. The last question for Sonia and Kirsten is I think it's a simple one, but I think it's a powerful one to end on, and you can just choose one. What is more valuable valuable to you? A seat at the table or a hand in setting it?
Okay, guess I'll kick this one off. So it's one thing to invite someone to the table, but have those placemats already been set? Like, has the menu already been set? For me personally, it's important for me to be a part of the setting because, like I stated before, like people are important to me, intentions are important to me. Just showing up in this space, not being motivated by who's in the room or how much compensation is coming along with this process or this initiative. Like, it's really important for me to sign on to projects and initiatives that resonate with me personally, like with my core values. So I've been leading with that, and it's been working for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the setting the table, but I go a little further to say building the table. Again, we have to make sure that young people are there from the very beginning stages. And so I think that before we can think about setting it, we need to think about how do we include young people early on when we're even thinking about the co-design and the co-creation of that process. And making sure that we're flexible when it comes to changing the course, that we understand that sometimes that's going to happen, and we need to make sure that we're readily flexible to change the course when it's necessary for young people. And that's really all I really have to give. I think it was a pretty straightforward question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all very much, panel, for that sharing the work and that important discussion. A couple of key takeaways: treat people like you want to be treated. Learn, listen, and unlearn when necessary. And the last one I saw was it is not just the data, but there's also a story behind the data. So thanks for telling your stories and sharing that information. Next, we will hear ideas and experiences of youth partnerships in 3 cities: my hometown of Baltimore, city of Fresno, and Tacoma. And we are honored to have the mayors of those 3 cities with us here today. To guide us through this conversation, I am pleased to welcome Tommy Hires, the Vice President for Civic Sites and Community Change here at Casey. Tommy?
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. It's truly a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon and to moderate this conversation with 3 very dynamic mayors. As Scott mentioned, we are joined today by the Honorable Victoria Woodards, the 39th mayor of Tacoma, Washington. She was sworn into office on January 2nd of 2018. The Honorable Brandon Scott, the 52nd mayor of Baltimore, sworn into office on December 8th of 2020. And finally, the Honorable Jerry Dyer, the 26th mayor of Fresno, California, sworn into office on January 5th, 2021, the rookie. So I thank you all for carving out time in your busy schedules to be here with us this afternoon. We just heard a really great conversation with young people who discussed how they partner with the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And I'm curious as to what opportunities exist in each of your cities for young people to become more engaged in the public policy conversation with elected officials. And I'd like to start first with Mayor Woodards. You're on mute, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tommy, and thank you so much to the Annie E. Casey Foundation for having us here today. And I wish we were in person. I would clap and scream, but I do just want to acknowledge the great panel that was before us and the young people who spoke. And I know they don't necessarily always consider themselves young people, but I consider a young person anybody younger than me. So you are still young people, but just so great to hear from them on what's important to them and how we engage them. So here in the city of Tacoma, when I was actually running for mayor, one of the things I heard from young people is that how do we get engaged? Can you make space for us? How can we share our thoughts and views? And this came from a young person who was 11 years old. And what she said to me was that, because the hard thing is that you only start talking to people when they're in high school. And there are others of us who have really good ideas about what we want our city to look like. So I started the city's first ever youth commission. We put out the call for applications. We were hoping to get, somewhere between 20 and 30, and we narrowed it down to 18, and we got over 125 applications. So as opposed to cutting down the number, we decided to accept every young person who wanted to be a part of the commission to help stand it up. And we had over 100 kids show up at various meetings over that first summer, and they designed and chose their own commission. They decided to name themselves the Mayor's Youth Commission. So we really put the ball in their court. We didn't tell them how to do it. We just allowed them to learn and to structure their own commission, which is what we have today. And they've done a lot. They set themselves up. They decided they wanted chairpersons. They then decided they wanted to have committees. So they operate in 4 different committees, and it's justice and safety, education, arts and culture, environmental policy, and social health. And we allow them to lead in the way that they want to lead. And it doesn't always align with City Hall, but it doesn't have to align with City Hall. It has to align with what they want for their community. And so I'll just tell you, just a couple of weeks ago, they sent me a letter about our police department and transformation within our police department. And they sent me a checklist of exactly what they wanted. So clearly they are not afraid to use their voice, but I think it's our responsibility as electeds to create space for them. What I really believe in my heart of hearts is too often we say that children, our youth, are our future. And I 1000% disagree with that. They are not our future, they are our present. And when we talk about building cities that are for our children and our children's children, we can't do that without engaging them and them telling us what they want us to build for them, not what we want them to have, but what they actually want. So I don't believe children are our future. I believe youth are our present. They're here today, and we should engage them now.
Thank you, Mayor Woodards. Mayor Scott, same question.
Yeah, I think, and first let me say to the panel before us, and of course, with Miss Allen being her wonderful Baltimore self is always a great thing to hear. But I think they help set us off in the conversation of where we need to be. Here in Baltimore, there are so many ways for our young people to be involved, and they are involved, right? We have a Baltimore City Youth Commission here designed to give our young people the opportunity to provide advice, recommendation, and thoughts for the mayor and city council. But we also know that there are so many groups and opportunities. And when I think about that, I think about groups like Be More Beyond Plastic. We would not have passed legislation in Baltimore around styrofoam and plastic bags and many other things that you see in this city were it not for high school students coming to Baltimore City Council by the droves, right? When you think about Organized Black and you think about Good Kids Mad City, all these folks that are fighting for police reform and reimagining public safety out in our city, that's being driven by our young people. And I think that what we have to do as folks that are sitting in these seats have to understand that, as my colleague, as the mayor said, the young people aren't the future, they're the right now. And they have to be at the table every day, every decision. They have to be a part of that because they're the ones that are going to be the most impacted by that. I know myself, I try to always include young people in everything that I do. That's why every single one of my transition committees had young people on it, and we were able to have them be a part of that conversation. There was no way that that was going to happen without me. I wanted them to be there because I knew that they would push and challenge everyone to think about things in a different way. This is why I do things like Instagram lives and Facebook lives, because I know it's a way for them to directly interact with me and making sure that we are making information and data, everything available for them so that they can touch us and inform our policies and our practices and challenge and hold us responsible, which is something here in Baltimore there is no short of, because I just mentioned a few, but there are organizations across the city, community groups, and individual young people that every day try to push our city to be better.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. Mayor Dyer, what opportunities exist in Fresno?
Well, I want to echo some of the things that were said, but I have a unique opportunity coming into the mayor's position. I spent 40 years in law enforcement prior to that, and the last 18 as a police chief. So I held a lot of youth forums. In fact, that was part of what we did on a monthly basis in the department. But transitioning over into the mayor's office, we are continuing with those youth forums. In fact, you have to make sure that those youth forums, I believe, are done at a time that's where they're available, not necessarily you. So my youth forums are on Saturday afternoon, which best fits their schedule, sometimes evening, but Saturday afternoons. The other opportunities that we have here, we too have a youth commission, a youth leadership commission. We have each of the council members appoint 2 members. I appoint 2. They meet twice a month, and they're the ones that are making decisions on, or at least advising our administration on things that we should be doing here locally. The other thing that I think is so important, I was elected last March and took office in January. And so I set out to be on a listening tour. And I met with a lot of our youth, and I met with those individuals who were leading our youth organizations. And I had to get reconnected, quite honestly. And one of the things that stood out that was said earlier, it's not enough to have a seat at the table. They have to make sure that the menu hasn't already been prepared. Our youth today are very astute. They know when they're being used. And that's why it's so important for us to build that trusting relationship with them, to be an active listener. There's a balance I think we have to choose and as elected officials, and that balance is between listening and informing our youth. And I've done a lot of listening, and I can tell you they're the ones that really shape the vision and the priorities for the city. I have 6 priorities, 6 mayoral initiatives, but one of those mayoral initiatives is youth leadership. So a mayor's advisory council, our youth commission, youth leadership commission, as well as being able to bring those youth in when we're doing many of our initiatives like Beautify Fresno, having them work side by side with us out on a weekend to clean up our city, critically important. Today I was out there at the Fresno State football practice. I spoke to about 100 of our youth football players and did a little interactive deal that we're putting on TikTok. And I can tell you right now, I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram and Twitter, but TikTok is where it's at today. And I know that for a fact because I did a TikTok last week, and in one day there were 500,000 views. So that's what our youth. That's that connectivity. That's that building trust. And I believe that that's what's important. And they have to have access to their leaders. And I received a call the other day. One of our NAACP youth leaders just sent me a text and said, "Hey, can we do such and such at this time in this location?" Within a minute, send a reply back, yes. So access is key. Listening is absolutely important. And then partnering in the community on things that are important to the neighborhoods.
Thank you so much. So let's talk about the power dynamics. You all alluded to making sure that young people not only had a seat at the table, but they helped to set the table and to also prepare the menu that would be available for everybody. City government holds enormous power to make decisions that affect everyone, including young people. And so when forming partnerships with young people, how do you approach sharing power with them? And Mayor Scott, I know you have to leave early, so we'll let you have first crack at that question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that comment. And listen, I've said this numerous times. Our role as mayor is not about me, and it's not about hoarding power. It's about making sure everyone in Baltimore is taken care of, and about building a strong foundation of action, trust, and transparency for city government. Right? Truth be told, one of the reasons why I'm sitting in this chair and why I decided to go this route with my life is because young people in Baltimore have been ignored by the folks that sit in this chair, right? That's what pushed me to serve, because time after time after time, we had folks who were here who just thought young people should be handled and not work with, and not viewed as partners, and not viewed as equal partners in how we have to approach this. So I approach it this way. by sharing power with them first, by actually allowing them to see me, to touch me, by listening to them and letting them know and showing them that their voices will not only be heard, but a part of that decision-making process, especially when I know they're going to be the most impacted. Again, that's why I had those young people involved on my transition team. They weren't they had the same kind of power that everyone else had there. I also want to build those avenues for them to hold me accountable. I will let them know, just like I let everyone else know, that I will make decisions sometimes that they won't like, but that won't be personal, and that they still will have the access to me. They still be able to hold me accountable, but also letting them and showing them, because there are many times throughout my career, I think from my other colleagues as well, that we can show how our young people have brought things to us that change our cities for the better. And you have to empower them to be a part of that, not just at the beginning, but every single step of the way, so that they are able to grow in their leadership and also harnessing their power to make sure that their neighborhoods and condition is improving.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. Mayor Woodards?
I agree with everything that Mayor Scott just said. I could just say ditto and be done. I'll just add a couple things to that. The fact that young people are not to be tolerated. They're a part of our system. And I think the Mayor's Youth Commission has really showed us how that works. I know for me, I make myself available at every meeting. When we met in person, I would show up, answer any questions they have. We could talk about, no subject was off the table, whatever they wanted to talk about. And I think helping them feel like they have access is incredibly important. In addition to the Youth Commission, another way that we give them power is that we have actual positions on our boards and commissions, which every city has. On a lot of our boards and commissions, there's a position designed for youth, so that if they're specifically interested in sustainability, if they're interested in human rights, there are positions on those boards and commissions for them to be a part of that policy-making structure. And helping to form those ideas at the very earliest stage. Having a youth commission means, and we've instructed staff, whenever we're working on something, we want to make sure that we're checking in with the youth commission to get their voice. And it's not just the Mayor's Youth Commission, it's with other youth groups in our community. Through our local foundation, we have a philanthropy board of young people. So it's really engaging not just those who are currently working with us, but even those who are not engaged with us. And I think the more you engage, that's the way you share power. And that's the way they feel like they're a part of the process. And yes, as Mayor Scott said, there will be times when we actually disagree. When we have to move policy in a different direction because there are a lot of other accounts. And that happens all the time. That happens with adults. We make decisions that that the adults we just met with don't necessarily agree, but we're listening to a lot of different voices. But I think young people but actually knowing that they have that access and that entry point, that's how you share power.
Thanks. Mayor Dyer, how do you approach power sharing with young people?
Well, not only do our youth want to be at the table and they want to be heard, but they want to see results. And what I've found with youth is that they want to see immediate results. They grew up in the information age where things happen very quickly. Sometimes in government, things don't happen very quickly, right? We have a bureaucracy. And so the things that I have to make sure that when they come forth with any type of an idea that is a viable idea as we work through it, that we're able to make that change quickly. Whether that's on our police commission on police reform, we've had youth engaged in that. Some of the things that we have to do in terms of police reform, they want to see very quickly. In fact, we have a parks commission that I'm establishing that's going to be responsible for determining how millions and millions of dollars are spent each year. One of my appointees is a youth person. And so that they can be involved in that decision making. But I really believe it has to do with them seeing results, knowing that their opinion mattered. And if they don't see results, quite frankly, I don't think they're going to be at the table very long. So that's shared power.
Thank you so much for that. And Mayor Scott, you're still here. So I'm going to try to squeeze in one more question with you before you go. So let's talk about strategies across sectors in our society. How can all of us, philanthropy, nonprofits, government, and business, how can we best work together to advance policies that will help all young people succeed?
Well, the first thing is actually include young people. And as was said earlier, include them in an authentic way. Listen to them, and not just the ones that you know. Go outside of your comfort zone and listen to young people that will make you uncomfortable. Invite them to the board meeting. Put them on the board. Hire them. Let them know that they are part of the process and should be taken very seriously. Think about innovative ways to work with young people. A lot of young folks are engaging with social media and the internet, as you heard. So find a way to make your organization accessible to them. And I think that the last is the most important. Get out into the community and get to know the young people around your community. You have to start there first. You cannot work across sectors. You cannot work in any sector anywhere and want to be inclusive of the environment and the community that you're in without working with those young people in an authentic and open way. And just know, as I always say, that with young people, you are going to get the 100% unadulterated truth. Just have to make sure that you're prepared for the smoke that they will bring.
Lots of smoke. Mayor Dyer, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I want to echo something that was just said was, what I found with our youth, I've had plenty of advisory boards over the years with adults. And oftentimes what I get are complaints. But what I found with the youth and the forums and the advisory council is that they bring solutions. They're real, they're creative, they're solution oriented. And if you allow them to develop the policy change, we'll be absolutely surprised. And so I think that's important that we use their language in whenever we're redoing policy within the city government, that we allow some of their writings, their language, their words. I can give you an example. We once before I'd asked them about our the school resource officers, how they viewed them. And they viewed them as very standoffish, standing in the middle of a courtyard, almost like prison guards. And I asked them what they wanted, and they shared with me exactly what they wanted. They wanted them being a mentor, they wanted them being a coach, they wanted them sitting at the table with them having lunch. And so we did all the things that they said, and not only that, we changed it to not only them be a school resource officer, but we changed the name to being a student resource officer, so that they're a resource to the students and not necessarily the school. So when they get to see that change and it's real, I really believe that that's when you start getting more and more creative ideas from them.
Thank you. Mayor Woodards, how do you think we can best work together?
Well, one of the things that was said earlier is I think so often we want to invite youth in. And I think my two colleagues mentioned this as well. We want to invite youth in, but the idea is that if you really want to engage youth, you have to go to them. And so trying to mold them so that they fit into our structure is not a way to authentically engage them. We have to go where they are, and we have to change our structure to meet their needs. I mentioned earlier, like here in Tacoma, there are lots of ways that youth can engage, but our local foundation started a youth philanthropy board. And they didn't just start a youth philanthropy board so that youth could tell them what they wanted. They actually gave them money to hand out, and they paid them for their time. And it's like, you can't just say, we want to hear from you. That's also a way of sharing power. We're gonna give, not only are we going to educate you on how to do this, we're going to let you do this. And I think even in ways as policymakers that we can engage as Mayor Dyer just said, and actually make the changes that they bring to us. That's not only how we can engage them, but that's going to actually get more youth involved. So I think making sure that we're reaching out to where they are, that the whole city. What I'm really grateful about is that we are working to be a youth-centered city. So that means not just City Hall, but every organization within the city is working at that. And so I think bringing everyone to the table to think about not just how City Hall engages, but how we engage youth in every structure in the city is really, really important. And I think going to them and asking them what they need and how we can best do it so that they will engage is a way to make sure that we're engaging them across all sectors.
Thank you so much. So you've heard a theme around racial equity during the earlier portion of the conversation, and so I'm curious as to your thoughts around the role that government should play in ensuring that there are equitable outcomes and opportunities for young people of color. And what are some of the strategies that have worked in your cities to provide equity for Black and Brown youth, and what more needs to be done? Mayor Woodards, we'll start with you on that one.
Absolutely. Or I don't want to lose Mayor Scott. So Mayor Scott, can you stay around long enough? I'll let you go first if you need to go. Did we lose Mayor Scott?
I think Mayor Scott may be gone. I was told that he had to be out of here by 4 o'clock.
Okay, great. Well then, no problem. So one thing, when we talk about equity, you have to be intentional. You can't just say you want equity. You have to be intentional. So for us as a city, I make sure that we are focused and intentional about making sure that there are more Black and Brown youth engaged, especially in the Mayor's Youth Commission. That means that when we look at who's applied or who's coming around the table or who's showing up at the meetings, that if we don't have good equity and good diversity around that table, then we are purposefully going back out to find young people and to meet them where they are to be a part of this. But I think it's really important. One of the things that I did before I was mayor, I was a council member. And one of the things I'm really proud of is that from a policy perspective, I helped to stand up our Office of Equity and Human Rights. Because it was something I thought really needed to be embedded in our city. And that was at a time when it wasn't quite popular yet. Now everybody has an Office of Equity, but it wasn't quite popular. And that's because, again, if you're not intentional about it, it's very easy for it to fall by the wayside on all the other priorities. So, and it's more than just setting up an office, it's making sure that everything you do has an equity footnote. So this year in our budget session, every department had to actually come with an equity action plan. And so, and adding to that, as we grow that out, it'll be, okay, in addition to just an equity plan for your department on how you'll function internally, how are you externally functioning? How are you making sure that young people are engaged in the conversation? So as we grow those equity plans, that's just one way. But the one piece of advice I would say is that you've got to be intentional, and you can't just assume that by sending something out or by asking one group that you're going to get the kind of engagement and equity that you want. You're going to need to focus and really pay attention and be focused on making sure that we're bringing equity to the table.
Thank you for that. And Mayor Dyer, as you think about how to respond to that question from Fresno's perspective, would you also talk about how mayors can assure diverse representation of youth as you're pursuing equitable opportunities?
Well, first off, I think it's important for mayors of cities, if we're going to deal with equity, then we must publicly acknowledge the fact that there are inequities and that those inequities are historical, that they have been built into systems. And then we have to ask, what systems do we currently have today that are disparate, the ones that have been exclusionary? The first word that I have in my vision statement is inclusive. An inclusive, prosperous, beautiful city where people take pride in their neighborhood and community. But it's got to be inclusive. And I agree with the fact that we have to be intentional. You know, I heard a good friend of mine here recently said that the walls of slavery were intentionally built, and that we have to be equally intentional about tearing down those walls. And so it is important that when we build whatever it is in our city, that we do look through that equity lens, that we're making sure that every decision that we make, that we're being considerate of what that looks like, the optics. You know, I don't care if it's something that we're doing in terms of an image or some type of a brochure. We need to make sure that there is an equal representation. There is equity, that people see it. So I just really believe that having people surround yourself with people, they're going to make sure that you are looking through that right lens. Because I think sometimes in America today, we sometimes surround ourselves with people that look like us and think like us. And then it's very, very difficult for us to be able to understand how that might have impacted somebody by what you said or what they saw. So that equity lens is so important and so critical, and we have to be intentional about it.
Thank you. So thinking about where you are right now in your cities, what are some of the policy opportunities your respective administrations are working on this year that you have on the horizon that young people can look forward to and can maybe engage in? Start first with Mayor Woodards.
Great. So one of the things I'm really excited about that we have embarked upon, we just launched in December, is what we're calling Heal the Heart of Tacoma. And HEAL standing for Help, Empower, and Lift. And it is it's our goal, it's the goal of Heal the Heart of Tacoma to become an anti-racist city. And so as we stood up Heal the Heart of Tacoma, we made sure that on our core coordinating team that we actually set space aside for young people. We also made sure the goal was that over 50% of the core coordinating team would be made up of African Americans. And so, again, being incredibly intentional. But as we go through this Heal the Heart process, what I'm excited about for our youth in this community is that in addition to just the core coordinating team that's going to look at every system, we will stand up transformation teams that will focus on a system, because I believe we can fix policing, but I'm not looking for a perfect criminal justice system. I'm looking at fixing systems that keep people out of the criminal justice system. So removing every barrier. And as we do that, we're talking about removing barriers for our young people. And so in every part of that policy that will come back to us, there are spaces that are specifically identified for young people to be at those tables. We'll use the Youth Commission. We're also this year, our young people are going to actually move forward with a youth summit in Tacoma, maybe virtual, but a youth summit in Tacoma, and not just for high school students, but for every student. And so out of that will come policy. And policy isn't just around transformation, it's around policing. I mean, it's around public works, it's around infrastructure. It's around everything that the city does because it has an impact on young people. So as we move policies forward this year, having those two opportunities for youth to engage and really tell us what policies work, that's something I'm really excited about in a way that our youth are going to be able to engage.
Thank you. Mayor Dyer?
So some of it is already occurring today in terms of gathering information from our youth in terms of what they want in terms of programming in parks and recreation programs for the city. We have a unique opportunity this year. We passed a sales tax initiative that's going to generate considerable $30+ million a year that comes in to do parks, programming, youth activities, and a number of things. So we have a Parks Commission that is going to be engaged with youth for the purpose of identifying what they want us to build in terms of programming in our city around. The other one is we have what's called Camp Fresno. And it is up towards the mountains, and we're going to be taking youth up there, sometimes youth that may be already involved in a gang lifestyle, but it's all for the purpose of getting them out of the environment that they have today, interacting with many of our folks, and being able to determine how they can play a role in changing some of our policies. I will say this, that we have 3,800 employees in the city of Fresno. Once COVID is behind us, we have a plan to have those employees mentor many of our youth in Fresno, to spend time with them at work, to look at things that our employees do, to be able to offer opinions and advice and suggestions as to how we might be able to do things different. So I want our youth engaged. I want our youth involved. I want to meet them where they're at. We want to give them a voice. We want to listen. And everything we do, we want to look through the eyes of the youth and say, How does this decision impact our youth today and in the future?
Thank you all so much for your participation. I want to again thank Mayors Dyer, Woodards, and Scott for joining us this afternoon and for sharing your perspectives. I will now turn things over to Scott Spencer, who will close us out for this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Tommy, I also want to join you in thanking Mayor Scott, Mayor Dyer, and Mayor Woodards for sharing your ideas with us today. This was really, really great. I mean, there were many, many takeaways, but there are a couple that I jotted down. One is, Mayor Woodards, you said it earlier on, youth are the present. You know, as well as being the future, they are the present. And that youth bring solutions to the work. It has become even more clear to us that working with young people is not just a part of our work. It's essential to our work. And we hopefully it will be critical to your work going forward too. The foundation is determined that every young person in America will thrive by the age of 25. And in order to do that, we need to strengthen the partnerships we have so that they are authentically engaged, even if it's on TikTok. We need their voice. And on March 25th, we will focus more on youth voice, how it is amplified through the media and other places. So please plan to join us for the final Youth Voice and Power Summit at 3 p.m. on March 25th. And you can watch in your email inbox for more information. Until then, I hope you stay safe, take care of one another, and be well.